Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I'm sure is probably in your YouTube recommendation every other day, the rent versus buy debate. But stick around because this isn't going to be another video where I'm just throwing numbers at you and telling you about how property appreciates and the opportunity costs. Instead, we're going to be having real life conversations about what this decision actually means for your life. As some of you may know, I'm a property investor that still rents my home. I have 2 investment properties in Liverpool, but I rent my home in London. And no, it's not because I don't understand the property market or can do the maths. It's because the rent versus buy decision is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about your life, it's about your circumstance, it's about your future plans. And there's so many critical questions that you need to ask yourself before you make this decision and not just looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet. Now, one of the problems I have with the traditional, rent versus buy debates that says, when you're renting, you're throwing money away, property prices always go up, you're paying someone else's mortgage, is because this argument is oversimplified. It actually oversimplifies the complexities of someone's life. Like, life is not that simple, and so is this decision. There's so many other questions that you need to ask yourself, and those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in this video. So let's start with the first question, which is, what are your true motivations for wanting to buy a house versus renting one? Is this some sort of like social pressure that you're putting on yourself because everyone around you is buying a house or thinks that you need to buy a house and, for fear of missing out, that's the reason why you're considering doing this? Or are you looking for stability in your life where you think that, hey, you know what, you're actually ready to buy your forever home and that is the reason you're trying to do it? Now, for me, one of the reasons I didn't choose to buy my home and I chose to buy investment properties instead was just because I didn't have the desire to buy a home. I was really fine with renting. I wasn't really trying to calculate whether one is the right decision for me or not. And that's simply fine. It wasn't on my radar to buy, a residential home. I was looking for where to park whatever savings I had. And I thought about investing it in property, and I didn't think that buying my residential home was where to put the money. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And that's it for me. It didn't really matter what anyone else was doing around me. I just didn't have that personal motivation to go and buy a home that I was going to be living in. And one of the reasons for me not even wanting to buy a residential home at the time that I started looking into buying properties was simply because, one, I like living in London and I'm still relatively new in the UK. The narrative then and even now is that London is unaffordable for a lot of people. Nobody can buy in London. London is too expensive. And to be honest, I ran with that. Even though I know that I was looking to buy an investment property and the deposit requirement was much higher for an investment property versus a residential home, to be honest, just hearing that London was above my price range, I just ran with it. I didn't even know what the prices of properties were in London. I just simply ran with it, and I felt like, hey, there was no way I could afford this, and therefore I wasn't even thinking about it. I wanted to continue to stay in London, so buying a home was not something on my radar. The other question I need you to think about is, where are you in life? Now, are you settled in your career? Like, do you even know the city you want to live in long term, that it makes sense for you to say, okay, yes, now you want to go and buy? If you move around a lot, your motivation and your decision-making process about buying versus renting is going to be totally different from someone who has a permanent base or who has a family or who wants to settle down in one particular city. So these are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about renting versus buying, as opposed to just, which one are you saving money on the most and all of that, like we see in most of the videos out there. The other question you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about, the rent versus buy decision is, what sort of flexibility do you want for your future self? Now, for someone like me now that I already have my indefinite leave to remain, to be honest, I don't know what my long-term plans in the UK is, right? I know I'm here at least at the minimum up until I get my British citizenship, but anything after that, it's really open. So if you're still uncertain about your future plans and you're thinking maybe you might want to move to another country, maybe buying a home may not make sense for you. Maybe renting is what you want to stick with because you have the flexibility to be able to move at any point in time, as opposed to thinking about how you're going to either dispose of your property or get onto another mortgage so that you can rent it out while you are in another country. So these are things that you need to think about. Like, what are the changes that you're expecting that might happen in your life in the next 2 to 5 to 7 years that you need to put into consideration when you're thinking about whether or not you want to buy or rent. Another question you might want to ask yourself is, are you able to find the right financing option for you? Now, what do I mean by this? Now, there are a lot of Muslims, for example, that don't like the traditional, mortgage system where you pay interest on the money you've borrowed from the bank. And they prefer to have access to like Islamic mortgage, where maybe they buy the house, they agree a particular price with the bank, and that's what they pay over the life of their mortgage. What if, you actually want to buy a house, but then you don't have access to Islamic mortgage in the city you're in or in the country you're in? This starts to put limitations on whether or not you're able to buy. And you now have to think about alternative ways of financing the purchase of a home. Another example could be maybe someone that is a bit much older. So let's say you're closer to retirement age and you want to buy a home. There are a lot of lenders that will not lend to you when you have crossed a certain age. While there's some lenders that have like special products that they can use to lend to you, maybe for a short period of time, or maybe some other kind of creative ways to lend to much older people to still acquire a home. If these options are not available where you are, your best option might be to just go and rent. Otherwise, like we do in Nigeria, most people that I know would buy their land and build on it. I don't know too many people that have used the mortgage to buy a home back where I'm from. So this might be an option for you, that then you now want to maybe buy the land and then build your house, and then that maybe solves your problem. So financing options are there. Another question that you need to ask yourself is, how much knowledge do you actually have about what it takes to actually buy a home versus renting one? And I'll start with the first one that I hear a lot, where people actually work out how much total interest they have to pay in 25, 30, 35 years, however long you take a mortgage for. And they're like, no, it's not worth buying a home. And that is the reason they're not making that decision. And they will rather rent, which is totally fine. However, if you know that even though you may have a 40-year mortgage, for example, but you have the option to actually overpay your mortgage up to 10% most of the time, and this can actually reduce the amount of interest that you pay over the life of your mortgage, and even reduce the term of the mortgage. So the idea of, hey, you know what, I don't just want to be working and be paying a mortgage over a 40-year period. You do have options where you can overpay maybe monthly by £100, by £500, by £1,000, depending on your capacity, up to the limit that is allowable by your mortgage lender. And you can also even reduce this cost. So if you don't have enough knowledge, you have to go and find that out. The next kind of knowledge that you need to have is, hey, what does it really mean to own a home versus renting one? Remember, if you're renting a home, all you're paying is your rent. Yes, at best, your rent is going to go up year on year. But if like major things break down in your home, like your boiler, that is on your landlord. That is not on you, versus if you own the home, there are additional costs that is way beyond the deposit and your mortgage payment that you have to factor in. There's so much more cost on you. If your boiler breaks down, you have to fix it. If someone breaks into your home, if there's a fire, yes, you might have insurance, but that headache is on you. So there's so many of all these other costs that maybe a lot of people don't know. And to be honest, sometimes you don't know about some of these costs until you're in it, right? You've bought a house, for example, that is good on the surface. You think, oh, you just move in. And then you find out after you've bought the house that there's so much more that you need to do. And there's no one else that you can call like your landlord, because now you own the home. Now, another question you need to think about is, what would I invest my money in if I'm not buying a home? Because in as much as owning a home can be a long-term investment, there are other things you can invest in that can still grow your money without actually owning a property. So have you really thought about it? Or are you just going to keep your money in the bank and watch it? Or you're going to maybe look for other ways of investing it, either in a business, either in the stock market, either in yourself, whatever that is where would you rather invest this money in if you're not buying a home? Another question that you need to ask yourself is, how much time do I have to actually make this decision, right? And that is where I am right now in my life. I'm thinking about the time factor, because whether or not you like it, your age actually plays a role in whether or not you can get financing to buy a house if you're using a mortgage, how much term you're able to get, because mortgage terms are shorter the older you get. So if you buy in your 20s, for example, you may be able to spread your mortgage repayment over the maximum term of 40 years. But if you're buying in your 40s or in your 50s, that's a totally different story entirely. And to be honest, this affects affordability. If you're buying a £400,000 home over a 40-year period, yes, you'll pay more interest, but you'll have lower repayments. Versus if you're buying the same house, let's say when you're 45 years old and you're only able to spread the mortgage repayment for maybe say 20 years or 25 years, you're going to have a much higher monthly repayment, which can impact whether or not you are actually able to afford to get this mortgage. And that is where I am right now, where I'm thinking, hey, I'm in my late 30s, I haven't bought my own home. There is an impact to affordability the more I delay it. And now I'm thinking about, okay, maybe my next property should be my own personal home. Another thing that I'm thinking about now in terms of timing is the stamp duty threshold that is going to drop in March 2025. Now, if you're here in the UK, ordinarily now, up until March 2025, you don't pay any stamp duty as a first-time buyer if you're buying a residential home up until £425,000. Anything above that, you start to pay 5% stamp duty on that. Now, by the end of March next year, this threshold is going to drop from £425,000 to £300,000, which means that anything you buy over £300,000 as a first-time buyer from the 1st of April 2025 is going to attract 5% of that difference first off, which is like what? Over £6,000 that you now have to budget for additionally if you were buying a £425,000 home from the 1st of April 2025. So I'm thinking about that cost to say, hey, do I want to wait and incur that cost? Because really, if I'm thinking that I might be able to buy in London, it means that I need to now be budgeting a lot more for stamp duty if I don't decide to do it as soon as possible. So you see, the rent versus buy argument isn't a one size fits all as to which is better. So don't let anybody shame you into thinking, hey, you're throwing money away if you're renting, or you're tying yourself down if you're buying in one place. There's so much more that you need to think about when you're thinking about making a decision. Like, what are your personal circumstances? What are your financial goals? Where are you in life? Are you ready to settle down in one place? These are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. And really, there are no right or wrong answers at the end of the day. You just have to do what's best for you. So please share your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what are the factors that are influencing your decision to either buy or rent at the moment. And let's have this real conversation about it. Anyways, I've come to the end of this video. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.